Okay, it's time to get started. Thank you everyone for joining our live lecture. My name is Isaac and I'll be the lead instructor for today's lecture. And the topic for today is going to be mobile development. Okay, so getting started, let's go ahead and let's talk about the different kinds of mobile development there are. Okay, so there's two major kinds, right? So the first one is native development, and this was the first original kind, and it's still widely used today, and it's where we use the phone's native software language to write a software application, okay? So you can see here that we have native languages here for different devices, okay? So most popular for Android devices is Java, and most popular for iOS devices is Swift. Okay, so now let's direct our attention to just a regular web app, right? Okay, so this is what you're used to building, right? Something in a browser using things like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and it displays just fine. Okay, so now let's talk about the second kind of mobile development. This is what we're going to be learning today. This is cross-platform, also known as hybrid. So essentially what this is small websites running in a browser shell in an app that has access to the native platform layer. So this third diagram we see here, we're still using the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript just like we would in a regular web app, except we're using this web view and web wrapper or native wrapper to compile it into the native code. And then what we can do from here is we can deploy to multiple platforms, okay? So the advantage here is if I was a company and I wanted a native iOS app and a native Android app, I'd have to go out and hire 2 developers. Versus if I wanted a hybrid of just everything, I would just create a single code base with hybrid and I could deploy it to multiple, okay? So let's go ahead and let's talk about the technology we're going to be using to build our app today. Okay, so the first one is Cordova, and Cordova is an open source mobile development framework, and we get to use things we're already familiar with like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So the official documentation for that is at cordova.apache.org, and you can just scroll through and view it as you need, okay? But this is really what we're going to be using to, frame out and build out and, deploy our app, okay? So now we've got that covered. Let's talk about Ionic, okay? So although we can build user interfaces with just raw HTML using Cordova, it's not very practical, and the very common approach is instead to use a framework like Ionic, which this will provide the UI for us. So we don't have to build everything from scratch, and it's meant for mobile, so it looks really good. And so that's on top of that, though, it's built with Angular. So that means if you already know Angular, again, you don't have to go out and learn Java or Swift, right? You can just use what you already know from client-side coding and apply it accordingly. Okay, so the documentation for Ionic is at ionicframework.com. Okay, so now we've covered that. Let's go ahead and let's talk about one restriction, okay? And it has to do with iOS development. So if you want to write a native or cross-platform app for an iOS device, then you have to use a Mac computer to have access to Xcode. Okay, so as you know, Apple is very exclusive in their products, and this goes for their developers. So if you just have to have an iOS app, or you need that ability, then you're going to need to make sure that you have the appropriate machine. So that being said, today we're going to be building an Android app, and that way everyone can build it, whether or not they have a Mac or a Windows. So let's go ahead and let's first start off by installing Cordova on our machine. And then that will give us access to a Cordova command line tool we can then use to quickly scaffold together a Cordova app. So first things first is we need to install it globally. So we're going to say npm install -g Cordova. Okay, so you'll notice I'm using npm here, and if for some reason at this point you don't have it, you can go to nodejs.org, install Node, and it comes with npm. from here, we can see the -G flag, and this means it's global. So it'll be a one-time install on our machine, and then we don't have to do it again. So if you don't have it, go ahead and run that. But because I already have it on my machine, I'm actually just gonna backspace here, and we'll go to the next command. Excuse me. All right, so next, let's go ahead and change directories onto our desktop, because that's where we want to create our new Cordova app. Okay, now we can go ahead and we can use the Cordova command line tool and scaffold that together. We just need to use the following commands. Okay, so we'll say Cordova, create, and then we will name it hello world. Then we'll pass in that domain. So let's say com example.hello world, and then space hello world. Okay, so that should populate on our desktop for us. So we'll give it a minute here, and look at that, scaffold together for us. Okay, so now we just have to change directories. So we'll say change directories into hello world. And let's go and open it up in our text editor, see what's happening under the hood. So if you don't have, the text editor I'm using today, I'm going to be using Atom. If you're using Sublime or Visual Studio, that's okay too. Okay, so let's go ahead and just open that up and inspect our project. Okay, so as you can see here, we have hooks, platforms, plugins, our response, and our this is our actual app right here. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to add a platform. Okay, and when you add a platform, then you can deploy it using an emulator. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's run this on our server. Okay, just to try to run Cordova on a browser instead of a device. So what we're going to do is let's use HTTP server. If you don't have this, you can install it by saying npm install HTTP. Actually, npm install -g HTTP -server. Okay, now let's install it globally. Once that's installed globally, then we can run it by saying HTTP. Okay, and I'm sorry, HTTP server. There we go. Okay, so as you can see, it's running on 8080. So let's go ahead and go to that port. We'll say localhost 8080. And now, if we go to the www, we can see that it is attempting to connect to the device. However, it's never actually going to be able to make that connection because we're not actually using any sort of emulator or anything, right? So because it expects the device to connect to, it'll just hang there. So let's go ahead and let's set up Android as a platform here. And once we add that, we can then emulate it on an Android device. So let's go ahead and let's cut our connection here. And let's say Cordova platform add Android. Okay, and then let's go ahead and save it using our -- save flag. Cordova platform add Android, enter. Okay, so now we just have to give it a minute to go out and grab all the dependencies that the Android platform is going to need. Okay, so this is a good time to mention that mobile development takes a while. Okay, lots of installations, and so you gotta make sure you be patient in that regard. So moving on, now we've added that. Next step is we need to set up our emulator. Okay, and today we're gonna be using an Android emulator. So to get this, we need Android Studio. So first, go to Android or developer.android.com. And then you're going to see they're going to allow you to install Android. When you do, it should come with the Android SDK. So I already have it on my machine, so I'm not going to install it, but I'm going to open it. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's come in our applications here, and let's open up Android Studio. Okay, And we'll just give this a minute to open up here. Okay, so while our Android Studio is booting up, let's go ahead and build this, okay? And why we need to build this is because we want to launch it and deploy it to this device, and it's got to be built for production. So how we're going to do this is we're going to say Cordova build. Okay, and then we'll just give that a minute to run its build. And from here, you can see that Android Studio is almost ready to go. So let's give these a minute. Okay, excellent. So from here, let's go ahead and click on Start a New Project. Okay. And excellent. So let's call this Coder Camps Mobile. We really call it what we want, but we'll just, make us basic. Then we click Next. Then we just got to verify the SDK is the latest and what device we want, which I'm just going to stick basic with phone and tablet. Next. From here, we can go ahead and choose some activity. And I'm just going to use empty activity, so I don't have anything. And I click Next. From here, it's going to ask activity name. Again, I didn't choose any, so I'll just leave that as the default and finish. So from here, it's going to create your Android project, and it's going to take a minute to do this. So we'll just let it do its thing. As we can see here, in the background, we still have our build running. So we'll just let that keep going. And in a minute here, we will be able to create what's called an Android virtual device. So an AVD is an emulator which we can deploy our code to and see it, how it would really appear on a real mobile phone. So we'll just give it a minute to boot up here, and we will create and activate our AVD. Okay, so from here, it looks like it's done, but when we close this tip of the day, we can see that there's actually 2 processes still running. So before you do anything, actually let these finish, because you'll notice if you start clicking buttons and trying things, you'll actually think the program's broken or something, because these processes haven't finished. So they just take a minute or two to wrap up. Okay, so as you can see, looks like they're done. So now let's just go back to our build and let's see how that's going, okay? So we look at our build and look at that. It lets us know that our build was successful. So because our build was successful, let's go ahead and let's open up our Android virtual device in Android Studio. So how you do this is you got a bunch of icons up here. You just need to go to the icon that says AVD, okay? So when I hover over this, it says AVD Manager, okay? So let's go ahead and click on that. And we'll give that a minute to spin up. And from here, as you can see, I already have a device created. However, if you don't have one, you can easily create one by just clicking this button right here, Create Virtual Device. And then it's just going to take you through, okay, what phone model you want, what brand, what size of screen, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so it really lets you get customized, so you can test a bunch of different devices and brands, and always make sure that your app looks great. But for today, I'm just going to use this Nexus Android phone. So how I activate this is pushing the play button. And after I push play, we can see that it's starting up our AVD. Okay, so we'll just give it a minute to do that. And then we're going to see a phone appear, just like a regular phone would. It's going to start booting up. So if it doesn't turn on right away, you can always click on the power button, and it will start the turn on process for you. Okay, so it looks like I don't see any loading down here. Okay, so it looks like that's done, and as you can see, pretty much as soon as it's loaded down here, it will start the actual phone. Okay, so we just got to give it a minute to turn on. I know that might seem a little silly. This is a virtual device, has to turn on. But again, they're trying to make it as close to the real thing as possible. So let's just go ahead and wait a minute or two for it to, set itself up. And then we can go ahead and we can run this. Okay. So starting and good. Okay, excellent. So from here, let's go ahead and let's run this. Okay, and how we can run this is the command Cordova run Android. Okay, so you see the first step was I added it, and the second step, I built it, and then the third as I run it. Okay, and because this is set up as my virtual device, I'm gonna deploy and launch on here. So let's go ahead and hit enter, and we'll just give that a minute to execute accordingly. Alrighty, so looks good, looks good. Okay, build successful, perfect. So as you can see, it's gonna let us know, hey, it deploys it, installs it, and then it's gonna launch it. And then, just like that, we're gonna have a Cordova connection, which we didn't have before when we just tried to launch it in our regular browser. But now we're on connecting to an actual device. It's going to say connected. Okay, so you see how it says device is ready. So this is really exciting because before it was like just hang in there and it wouldn't change status. And now we've connected. Finally, our app is up and running, so we can add a user interface and all the other logic like we normally would. So that brings in Ionic. Okay, so before we move to Ionic, I'm going to go ahead and stop and open the floor for any questions anyone has about Cordova. So go ahead. The floor is open for anyone who wants to ask those questions now. Okay, no questions on Cordova, folks? No? Okay, so if that's the case, then we'll move on to Ionic. Okay, so as you can see, Cordova, again, is the framework that's running our application. Now we just need to bring in Ionic to add a user interface, right? So we can have button clicks and we can have text that's displayed and all that great stuff. So the great part is Ionic also has a command line tool just like Cordova does, and it helps you quickly scaffold together an Ionic app. But the great part is Ionic uses Cordova out of the box, meaning when we install Ionic and we create an app with Ionic, it's actually going to include Cordova already for us. So we can just quickly use it as needed, and we don't have to build a Cordova project and then an Ionic and then combine them. It just actually will put these all together for you. And as you saw, there's lots and lots of source files, stuff like that. So you definitely don't want to push it any more than you have to as far as making stuff from scratch. All right, so that being said, let's go ahead and we'll close down our processes here. No more Android Studio. Okay. So from here, let's go ahead and install Ionic. Okay. So how we can do this is we need to do a global installation. So we will say npm install Ionic npm install -g Ionic. Okay. And when you run that, it's going to install it globally on your machine. And just like the previous instance, I actually already have this installed just like Cordova. So I'm not actually going to run this installation. And once you have it installed, you can then use the Ionic command line tool to scaffold together your app. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to change directories onto the desktop. Okay. From here, let's go ahead and let's create our new Ionic app. We'll go ahead and say Ionic start. Okay. That's how we start new scaffolded app. And then we just need to name it. So let's go ahead and name it my first Ionic app. Okay, and enter. All right. So from here, it should generate that on our desktop for us. So now we just need to select what kind of pre-made app we want. And they give you, 4 or 5 different options here you can choose from. And if you're not sure, you can always go to Ionic's site and they show you what each one looks like. But we know actually that we're just going to be using tabs. It's because it's the most basic template. So let's go ahead and go with tabs. And so because that's the default option, all I have to do is hit enter, and it's going to download everything for us. And when I mean everything, I mean everything. This installation can tend to take a bit of time. And when I say a bit of time, I mean, anywhere from 4 to 5 minutes. Typically a little less sometimes, but it's a lot of work that, your, server's doing, putting all this together. So, that being said, you have to be patient in regards to, how your, programs are, running and all that good stuff. So that being said, let's give it a minute, do its thing, and we will continue. Okay. So as you can see, I was not joking about needing to be patient in mobile development. If you look at job postings, a lot of times mobile development pays more than just standard web development because it's a lot harder. Phones just aren't as powerful as computers. And because of that, you've got to do a lot more work to, get the kind of same effect. Luckily, that's changing. Hardware is getting better. Devices are getting better. But at the end of the day, there's really no getting around these processes here. So now it's going to ask us, we want to link this. We'll go ahead and say yes. All right, perfect. So now let's go ahead and let's change directories into our Ionic app. So we'll say my first Ionic app, and then let's go ahead and open this up in Atom. Okay, so we'll just go ahead. Well, I'm opening up in Atom. Again, you can open it up really wherever text editor works for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's go through the anatomy of this Ionic app. Okay, so as you can see, just like Cordova, we have these hooks, right? And so we're also going to have platforms and all that configured. Okay, so what we can do here is we can launch our Ionic app, and then we can change the interface based on what we need. So let's go ahead and serve this by saying Ionic serve. Okay, we'll just give it a minute, and it's going to pull this up for us. And we can view this in a phone emulator. Okay. Looking good. Okay. So now let's go ahead and click inspect. Click on the icon here, and then you can pick a mobile device. Okay. So as you can see, I'm just using like an iPhone 6. And now I can see exactly how it looks and feels on this kind of device. So if I click here, I can see that the tab works just like it would a normal device. Okay, so now let's talk about, all right, well, where is this interface coming from, right? How do we create our own logic and change this? So let's head back and let's go ahead and look inside our source. And inside source, go to pages and go to home and click on home. Okay, so if you notice, the markup and the text on home is the exact same as this page, this home page here. Okay, and so what we can do is we can just change this out, and it's going to render that accordingly. So we just got to close this, and then I'm going to put an H1 tag, And I'm just going to say, hello, world. Okay, so from here, we can save all. And when we refresh, we can see that we're getting hello, world instead of the other content. Okay, so how is this being displayed, right? This isn't an index file. So let's go ahead and let's head over to our index. Okay, so we click on index, scroll down, we can see that on line 36 we have an Ion app. Okay, and this is the root where all of your templates are mounted. Okay, so that being said, we are working under that kind of single page application architecture. So you can just go through all your other pages and change them out and add new ones accordingly as you need. And then because it's Angular, you can just use regular directives to perform your various different operations, such as click events and loops and all that kind of stuff. All right. That about wraps it up for today's lecture. So now we covered Ionic. I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor for any questions about that. Okay. You are live. Anyone have any questions about Ionic? Or Cordova, either one. All right. If everyone is okay, then let's go ahead and end the call. Have a great day and happy coding out there.